Hello, and welcome to How to Secure Data in Microsoft Fabric. In this module, you'll learn how to use the Fabric access control features available to secure your data and provide your team with the necessary access within Fabric to perform their job duties. You'll explore Fabric's multi-layer security model and how to use it to manage data access. By the end of this module, you'll know how to configure security for your entire workspace, individual Fabric data items, and how to apply granular permissions within Fabric data items. Security in Microsoft Fabric is optimized by securing data for specific use cases. Different users need the ability to perform various actions in Fabric to fulfill their job responsibilities. Fabric facilitates this by allowing you to grant users access to specific data workloads through Workspace and item permissions, compute permissions, and OneLake data access roles. A security use case in Fabric refers to a set of users needing data access to access data in a specific way. Once a use case is identified, Fabric permissions associated with the use case will be configured. Suppose you work in a healthcare company with multiple systems that store data, such as the electronic health record or EHR, an insurance claim data. Maybe you work with clinical and trial data or patent or patient disease registries and administrative data. Different users within your company or partner organizations need to view, transform, analyze, aggregate, and use this data to derive business insights. Users need to access different Fabric compute engines, items, and workspaces to perform their jobs effectively. For example, data engineers might need to access data in a lakehouse to develop downstream data products. Business and data analysts might need to query data to answer business questions. Data scientists might need to access data in a lakehouse and consume it through Apache Spark to create models and experiments. Report creators might need to build a report to share with report consumers. And report consumers might need to view data in Power BI reports to make decisions. Data access in an organization is often restricted by users' responsibilities and roles, by an organization's Fabric deployment patterns and data architecture. Fabric has a very flexible, multi-layer security model that allows you to configure security to accommodate different data access requirements. Having the ability to control permissions at different layers means you can adhere to the principle of least privilege, restricting user permissions to only what's needed to perform job tasks. Fabric has 3 security levels, and they're evaluated sequentially to determine whether a user has data access. The order of evaluation for access is first Microsoft Entra ID authentication, which checks if the user can authenticate to the Azure Identity and Access Management Service, using Microsoft Entra ID. Next, Fabric access checks if the user can access Fabric. And lastly, data security checks if the user can perform the action they've requested on a table or file. A user must be able to get through all 3 of these layers to be able to perform their task in Fabric. The third Fabric security level, data security, has several building blocks that can be configured individually or together to align with different access requirements. The primary access controls in Fabric are Workspace roles, item permissions, compute or granular permissions, and OneLake data access controls. It's helpful to envision these building blocks in a hierarchy to understand how the access controls can be applied individually or together. Please see the image on the right. A workspace in Fabric enables you to distribute ownership and access policies using workspace roles. Within a workspace, you can create Fabric data items like lakehouses, data warehouses, semantic models, and more. Item permissions can be inherited from a workspace role or set individually by sharing an item. Items are shared using item permissions when workspace roles are too permissive. Within each data item, granular engine permissions such as read, read data, or read all can also be applied. Compute or granular permissions can be applied within a specific compute engine in Fabric, like the SQL endpoint or the semantic model. Remember that Fabric data items store their data in OneLake. Access to data in the Lakehouse can be restricted to specific files and folders using the role-based access control or RBAC feature called OneLake Data Access Controls. Now let's take a look closer at our workspace roles. Remember that workspaces are environments where users can collaborate to create groups of items. Items are the resources that you can work with in Fabric, such as lakehouses, warehouses, reports, and more. Workspace roles are pre-configured sets of permissions that let you manage what users can do and access in the Fabric workspace. Item permissions control access to individual Fabric items within a workspace. Item permissions let you either adjust the permissions set by the workspace role or give a user access to one or more items within a workspace without adding the user or the workspace role. Let's consider some scenarios where you need to configure data access using workspace roles and item permissions. Suppose you work at a healthcare company as the Fabric security admin. You need to set up access for a new data engineer. The data engineer needs the ability to create Fabric items in an existing workspace and read all data in the existing Lakehouse. That's in the same workspace where you create your Fabric items. Workspace roles control users, what users can do, and access within the Fabric workspace. There are 4 workspace roles, and they apply to all items within a workspace. Workspace roles can be assigned to individual security groups, Microsoft 365 groups, and distribution lists. Here are the roles. Admin. The admin can view, modify, share, and manage all content and data in the workspace, and also manage permissions. The member role can view, modify, and share all content and data in the workspace. The contributor role can view and modify all content and data in the workspace. And the viewer role can view all content and data in the workspace, but cannot modify it. So to meet the access requirements for the new data engineer, you can assign them the workspace contributor role. This gives them access to modify content in the workspace, including creating Fabric items like lakehouses. The contributor role would also allow them to read data in the existing Lakehouse. Users can be added to workspace roles from the Manage Access button from within the workspace. Add a user by entering the user's name and selecting the workspace role to assign them in the Add People dialog box shown here in the image on the left. That appears after selecting Manage Access. Suppose that after a few months of having contributor access on a workspace, a data engineer no longer needs to create Fabric items and now only needs to view a single Lakehouse and be able to read it. Since the engineer no longer needs to view all the items in the workspace, the contributor workspace role can be removed and item permissions on the Lakehouse can be configured so the engineer will only be able to see the Lakehouse, metadata, and data, and nothing else in the workspace. This item access configuration helps you to adhere to that principle of least privilege permission, where the engineer only has access to what's needed to perform their job duties. Item permissions control access to individual Fabric items within a workspace. Item permissions can be used to give a user access to one or more items within a workspace without adding the user to a workspace role, and can be used with workspace roles if you'd like. An item can be shared, and item permissions can be configured by selecting the ellipsis or the 3 dots next to the Fabric item in the workspace, and then by selecting Manage Permissions as shown here on the image on the right-hand side. When the permissions provided by workspace roles or item permissions are insufficient, granular permissions like table and row-level security and file and folder access can be set through the SQL Analytics endpoint or through OneLake, data access roles, and even through the warehouse or semantic model. Data in the lakehouse can be read through the SQL Analytics endpoint. Each lakehouse has an auto-generated SQL Analytics endpoint that can be used to transition between the lake view and the SQL view in the lakehouse. The lake view supports data engineering and Apache Spark, while the SQL view of the same lakehouse allows you to create views, functions, store procedures, and apply SQL security and object-level permissions. Recall that data in the Fabric Lakehouse is stored with the following folder structure of files and tables. The SQL Analytics endpoint is used to read data in the Tables folder of the Lakehouse using T-SQL. Specifically on the right, the Read All SQL endpoint data allows you to read all tables and views within the SQL Analytics endpoint, like a Lakehouse or a warehouse. In the read-only mode, it's equivalent to the DB data reader role in SQL Server. Users can connect to the endpoint using tools like Power BI or SQL clients to run queries, but they cannot modify the data. Read All Apache Spark grants users access to read all the data in the Lakehouse using Apache Spark. It enables users to run Spark-based queries and notebooks to explore and analyze data, but again, only in the read-only capacity, and build reports on the default semantic model allows users to create Power BI reports using the default semantic model associated with the Lakehouse or the warehouse. We've covered how you can manage access in workspaces, items such as lakehouses, and different types of access to the lakehouse. These all control the workspace and the entire lakehouse, but you might want to control access even further. This is where you can use T-SQL to grant granular permissions within the lakehouse, such as tables that contain personally identifiable information. Consider a scenario where you have a patient table that you've limited access to with DCL or data control language permissions. Column-level security can prevent business analysts from viewing the Social Security number, SSN number, or the like. Row-level security can ensure that patients can only view their own data. And dynamic data masking can limit what is shown in the column, such as only the last 3 digits of the Social Security number or the like. Using a SQL Analytics endpoint, granular T-SQL permissions can be applied to our SQL objects using the data control language or DCL commands like grant, deny, and revoke. This can control access to tables and views, for example. To control access within the tables, you can use row-level security and column-level security. Dynamic data masking can also be used to mask the data within the results, as shown here on the image on the right. To further refine data access, folders in the lake view of the lakehouse can be secured using OneLake data access roles. You can create custom roles within a lakehouse and grant read permission only to specific folders in OneLake. Folder security is inheritable to all subfolders. To create a custom OneLake data access role, as shown on the image on the left, first select Manage OneLake Data Access from the menu in the lake view of the lakehouse. And then, as shown on the image in the right, in the New Role window, create a new role name and select the folders to grant access to. Once the role is created, assign a user or a group to the role and select the permissions to assign. Now let's see how to secure data access in Microsoft Fabric.
Now let's talk about securing data access in Microsoft Fabric. And I have my environment already set up here where I have my workspace. And then I've created a data warehouse here that has sample data. I got that off of Create. There's an option in here for Create, and I chose the sample data warehouse. So it's already pre-populated with data. And then I also have a lakehouse. And you can see both of them are here inside of my workspace DP-700 Demo 16. And what I want to talk about is different ways that you can secure access. So one of the options is this manage access. This is directly related to the workspace. So I can add people to this list, and notice too, I can add them by name or by email, and then I can associate them to one of the 3 groups that are here. So these are workspace roles. And the one that will give them, as you can imagine, every permission on the workspace would be admin. And if you want them to be able to read all data in the workspace, that is the viewer. So that might be a little too far, but this is one approach to it, is setting these roles on our workspace. And I'm going to go ahead and go into workspace roles. I want to show you the URL that we have there from Learn. And then I want you to see that you can come in and find out about each of the roles and what they do. You can also see that we have a chart and this other link here for permission model, and it shows the roles again. A little bit more specifically, we get a chart that shows exactly what each one can do. So you can use the workspace roles. Those are an option. And if you want to use those, you simply have to have permission on the workspace to be able to do that. The other roles that you can work with are really related to sharing and sharing out individual objects and then giving permissions or item permissions from that. So you have the roles, and we'll take a look at the roles also inside the lake house because we do have some from OneLake we'll look at a little later. But you can also give item permissions for individual objects here inside the workspace. So roles at the workspace level can do anything that those roles allow them to do in the entire workspace, but I can also share individual objects. So here I have the lake house, and I'm going to go ahead and click right here, and you're going to see some of the permissions that are available. Notice I could enter your name or your email, and I could have you read all SQL endpoint data. And if I set my mouse on that little eye, it gives me a little bit more info on it. I could also allow read all Apache Spark and subscribe to events. And I could also set it to build reports on the default semantic model. Now, some of this we may or may not know exactly what it all entails. There's a little bit more down here that it tells you about, but what I'm going to mention is we do have a link there out in Learn that will explain each of these. So notice we can do some sharing a couple different ways. You can see they've had a couple people in here. There's permissions, but each of those permissions, if you want a little bit more detail, we have it in here too. So you can take a look at this link. That might be very helpful. And then the other option we have is the warehouse is here, and that also can be shared. Now, again, you're going to add in the name or the email. You could have them read all data using SQL. So read all objects within that warehouse. Then you'll see you can also grant that permission, read all OneLake data and subscribe to events. And that is a little bit more options than just what that name says. So the I is very helpful here to kind of delineate that. You could have people build reports using the model. That one's pretty straightforward. You could have people be able to monitor the queries. Remember, we have that monitor button off on the left there inside of our bar. And if you want to allow them to do that, that will give them the ability to use those dynamic management views we mentioned earlier in Query Insights. And then you can see you can also give audit permission. This one is currently in preview. And you can grant, share grant permission. You can have them share the permission that they have with other people. So some of these you got to be a little careful with, as you can imagine. The data warehouse, if you want a little bit more about each of these, we do have it here on this link under Share Your Data and Manage Permissions. And what you'll see with this is if I scroll down a little bit in here, it shows you how to share it. It shows you some of the security roles in there. And this is where you want to look. This will give you the most information right here about what each one means. So that can be helpful right there. The other thing we'll need to note is the moment we start talking about working with a warehouse, we can also give granular permissions, column level permissions, row level permissions, dynamic data masking. So you can do the share permissions here for the warehouse and more available with the warehouse. So that should be helpful there. The other thing I want to focus in on is I'm going to go into the lake house. And in the lake house, there's an option up here. And it's currently in preview, but we can manage OneLake data access. And when we click on that link, you're going to see that there is a default reader. Now, when you first open this, you first have to have the preview enabled for it. Then you have to make certain that when you click on this that you say you want to turn it on. And then you'll get into this window where you have it right here. And notice you can use the default reader there if you'd like, and we can get a little deeper into them and assign people to them and delete them. So if I click on the default reader, notice I can assign people to the role here. And this default reader for OneLake is going to be able to read all folders. Now, if you want to narrow that down, I can choose selected folders, and I can say specifically what folders and files on OneLake you want people to be able to read. So remember that our OneLake is built on the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and it is hierarchically laid out. So I can take advantage of that and give permissions to files and folders. I can also, if I'd like to do this, add additional roles here. So you don't necessarily have to go with this one role. You can actually assign a new role to this. And that role would also have the ability to go in and add additional, you can say what folders and files you want it to be able to access. So you can add new roles, you can use the ones that are here, and then once you've created this, you can assign people to it. So you have a lot of features here that you can work with. And then remember we want to layer these permissions. So that will give us the most bang for our buck here. So you can have permissions at the OneLake tier. You can have it on the lake house. You could have it on the data warehouse. And you can also have it, of course, on the workspace. So a lot of tiers of security here that you can use. Thank you for your time. Hope to see you in the next section.
Now it's time for our knowledge check. Question 1. What workspace role should be assigned to a data engineer who needs to create Fabric items and read all data in an existing lakehouse? Answer: contributor. Question 2. What is the order of evaluation of access in Fabric? Answer: Microsoft Entra ID authentication, Fabric access, and data security. Question 3. Which of the following tools can be used to apply granular data access permissions in Fabric? Answer: OneLake data access roles. In this section, we talked about how to secure data by workload and job responsibilities. We also looked at the Fabric security model's sequential access evaluation and into the data security roles themselves: item permissions, compute or granular permissions, and OneLake data access controls. For more information on how to secure data in Microsoft Fabric, please see the link shown here.